Manchester in a typical Manchester welcoming fashion. I'm allowed to say that very quickly while Andy's not here. Welcome to our meeting just before Christmas. Can I ask first if there are any apologies, Julie, that we know of? Have we got any apologies, or they'll be recorded later on?
Chair, there have been a number of apologies, and those will be recorded in the minutes.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Can I welcome Emma Ward, who is the Director General of Roads and Local Transport at the Department, to the meeting. I'm going to ask Emma to say a few words just a little later on, once we've just gone through a few of the first bits of the agenda. I imagine the first part of the meeting to last for about 90 minutes, and then we'll finish the public part of the meeting, then we'll have a more closed part of the meeting to discuss the documents given by the department on MPR, which are shown to us at this stage in confidence, but I think they are a useful agenda point and a very good discussion to be had on some of the options which the department are now considering the work that's to be done. So the next item then is, I have to ask if anybody wishes to declare any interest with items that are on the agenda that have not already done so. Okay, thank you. Can I then move on to the minutes of the previous meeting? Martin, can you take some leads as far as... Sorry, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the minutes, if we've moved on to that section.
Yes, we're on that section now.
Lovely, thank you. I know it's really difficult when the conversation is moving fast, but if we could have an accurate record of the conversation, and certainly my opening remarks on the cancellation of HS2 aren't recorded. So just going forward, I know it's really difficult for people to be typing at speed, but just going forward, thank you, Chair.
We'll pick that up.
Yeah, oh, yes, definitely. Okay, thank you. Right, Martin.
Thank you. Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You have the you have the minutes, and we'll pick up Mayor Braben about the that point about just recording that there were other points made. In terms of the actions and matters arising from the minutes, they're all kind of either dealt with or being picked up elsewhere in this agenda. So you had a conversation at the previous meeting about HS2. You've got the conversation about transforming the North. I think it's worth just recording at the last board meeting you agreed to the response on ticket office closure proposals, and of course that was subsequently stopped, but there are conversations going on through the Rail North Committee about how we continue to sort of take advantage of things like stations as a place. It's also worth just bearing in mind in the context of the debate about the way forward for the North. We did at the same time, you at the same time as a board, signed off the new statutory advice in respect of travel round in and around Manchester, which is of course relevant in that it talked about how the corridor from Stockport into Manchester is pretty close to being a congested network, which will become a factor to think about moving forward. In addition, Chair, you've got a quick update from me about a number of things. We did this the last time, and I think it was found helpful, just a bit of a flavour of what's happening elsewhere. Just a couple of things to say. We will have a substantive item on buses at the next meeting. I know that members have been very keen about this. We had a very good, as you see, first bus forum, and we will want to bring something back on that to the next meeting. We're also tracking and working with the department about how proposals for the major road network will be taken forward and the funding that was announced in the Network North document. And the thing I would also point out is it's really encouraging to see, because I know the board members get the importance of aligning investment across infrastructure, so it's not just transport, it's with digital and with energy. And I think the work that we've been able to lead, working with Ofgem around their work about how aligning investment in energy infrastructure, I think that's a really powerful, and it's certainly something that's been leading across the country. The final thing just to say by way of matters arising, Chair, was just to say the date of the next TFN conference that's been set will be 5th of February. If you haven't already, you will be getting in your inboxes a note about that very soon. We will be in Liverpool, being hosted there, and it'll be a good day of dealing with many of the issues that we're going to be talking about today, and looking forward to the year ahead. Chair, that's all I wanted to say by way of update.
Any questions to Mark?
Chair, can I ascertain whether any questions we have on either the Chief Exec's report or the Ops report should be presented now?
Yeah.
Is that
yes.
correct? Yeah. Okay. I did have a point on the bus service improvement plan funding is mentioned, and I suppose it's really a statement. But or I can put it as a question: do we have any further clarity on whether the government intends this to be an annual award of funding to local authorities? Because somewhat similar to the Network North plans on a perhaps slightly smaller scale, local authorities don't know how to plan ahead when we simply receive one-off annual injections of money, however generous they may be. And I don't know whether anybody in the room who might be able to comment on that. It would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I'm just conscious that the North has actually missed out dramatically with the HS2 cancellation, and what I'm saying is that all funds that are made available from government should all be used in the North and not filtered down south. So that's got major considerations, and what we're going to put in place to monitor that situation, that the North who's missed out most, and we're sort of like a second best in general anyway, is that we don't sort of miss out even further by the funds being made available, and then we're not getting it all, we're only getting a part of it, and then the south starts filtering it but that way. So I think we've got mechanisms in place so we can monitor that situation to make sure the North get the full benefits of what's on the table. Not saying we like what's on the table, but saying why it's there, we should get the full share. And I think the other idea is obviously the road structure that's going to be put in place, replacing some of the train things. I'll put our bid in now for the Western Link in Warrington to be included in them thoughts. I think the other idea of the base, any funding coming in, instead of being piecemeal, if it could be built into baseline funding for council so they could actually count on it going forward. Pretty sorry for making all them points, but I thought it's something we need to be made and saying, get it out on the table, let everyone look at it in first, saying this is where we're coming from, and this is where our starting point, not our ending point.
I think that is a very good point, which we will continue to monitor all the way. As you rightly say, some of the alleged HS2 money I see is being used to pay for carrying with the support of bus fares throughout England as a whole, not just in the north. So I think that is a fair, valid point, which we need to keep well under mind. And certain road schemes, I think, in Devon have come out of that particular basis, but and potholes, as Oliver's just pointed out to us. So I think we do need to, and I think partly when we come on a bit later on to the Northern Powerhouse Rail, that is an area which we need to think a bit about that, but keep a watchful eye on as well. Okay, thank you. Right, are there any other points on the minutes or matters arising from that before I invite Emma to give us a bit of an update from the DFT as to the work going on there? Can we move on to that then? Emma, can I very much welcome you to the meeting. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Obviously, we are getting to grips with the announcement the Prime Minister made on Wednesday at the party conference, having told the nation on Tuesday that he hadn't made his decision yet, and Wednesday having a good 30 minutes as his speech. I did say in the House of Lords I've been around prime ministerial speeches at party conferences, and they're usually tied up a bit before 6 hours before they're delivered, but we'll leave that to that particular side. But I'm not asking you to comment on that, because that is outside your role. But we're very keen to work with the department as to getting the best deal we can for the North, and some of the consequences of that decision have widespread consequences for certainly our cities across the region. So can I hand over to you to tell us a bit about the current thinking? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it is a great pleasure to be here in person. I can't believe this is the first time I have actually come to a TFN board meeting. But as I say, I'm very pleased to be here and see so many familiar faces. Some of you I don't know, but very nice to see those of you who I do. As the Chair said, my brief in the department is roads and local transport, Network North, in terms of what was announced following the HS2 decision, very much cuts across lots of my work and my team's work. I've got colleagues here from rail and from our regional team as well. And I really look forward to hearing both your comments, your questions, and any concerns you might wish to raise. I recognise that the HS2 decision is one that not everybody around this table supports. I'm not proposing to go into that in any great detail, but what I do think is worth a real sort of genuine consideration and genuine kind of joint working is how we grasp the opportunity of what has been set out in the Network North announcement. And I think from my perspective, having worked on roads and local transport for some time and picking up the point that was made earlier on long-term funding certainty and the ability to invest in transport in a way that makes sense. Since I joined the department, I think we've really made huge strides in that, and I think Network North builds on that. So, for the first time, we have CRSTS allocations for the next decade. We've got highways maintenance commitments 10 years ahead. We've got the prospect of local integrated transport settlements for local authorities outside of mayoral combined authorities for the first time in a long time, again with funding certainty beyond the spending review. And I think that has the potential to be truly transformational in local places and to make a real difference to the way in which people perceive investment in transport, addressing the concerns that everyday people have. And that was much about where the Network North announcement was trying to focus our attention. So I think setting aside the concerns around HS2, I do think there is a genuine transformational opportunity out of this to drive better connectivity within towns, between our towns and cities, and, as I say, improving everyday journeys for people. I do like to talk about my group in the department as supporting more than 96% of journeys, and that is because the vast majority of journeys that people take are local ones. It is walking from their house, it is catching the bus, it is jumping in their car, and that is where this is focused. So I think a truly transformational opportunity. Of course, there is a degree of cynicism around it because we are, at most, I suspect, 18 months away from a spending review. But that is always the case, and we always have to be prepared to defend and ensure that we can secure the funding that has been committed politically as we go forward. But I think the track record of the department and this government in making real strides, as I say, in terms of changing the way that transport investment is thought about in Whitehall, is considered within the Treasury. I think we can see the progress that has been made there. So So I think before we get into the Network North discussion in a bit more detail, I sort of just wanted to set out, I think there are many reasons to be optimistic, many reasons to grasp the opportunity. The department absolutely stands ready to work with Martin and his exec team in Transport for the North, but also with this board. And I know ministers would want me to make that offer to you and emphasise that we are there to work in genuine partnership with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Emma, I didn't know if you wanted to specifically address
on
Councillor Hughes's
BSIP,
point, because I'm going to ask for some comments now, but do you want to address
on the BSIP point, as I say, we have made real progress in securing longer term funding timelines across a number of our budget lines. The BSIP one is one in which we are still in discussion, but I absolutely take the point, and as I say, I think you can see by the decisions that ministers have taken on many of these investments that they recognise the fact that long-term certainty out beyond a year or a spending review is going to be the thing that makes most difference. I think we have supported the bus sector in a way that has really helped to secure services. I think the £2 bus fare, I hope everybody would agree, has really helped to drive up demand in some parts of the country. It's probably the thing that people raise with me most. I have lots of WhatsApp messages from people with pictures of their bus tickets with £2 proudly displayed on the front. So it's absolutely a point I take away. It is well understood. We'll see where we get to at the next spending review. Thanks.
I think Tracy will tell us it was stolen from her.
We were the first. We were the first in the country.
We're not ashamed to steal good ideas.
That's teamwork.
It's never been a problem with governments or departments. That's certainly true. Councillor Hughes just wanted to come back on that, and then we'll take a few other points.
Well, thanks for the assurance that ministers are reconsidering how a bus service support is to be awarded in the longer term. But one of the issues, Emma, that you flagged up as demonstrating that the government's committed to long-term funding was the strategic highways programme, where it seems perhaps a slightly unfortunate choice in that with each new iteration of the RIS, actually more and more schemes fall out before reaching the end because the version before appears to have been overloaded, or undercosted and so on. So I'm hoping perhaps if bus service improvement funding is awarded on a longer term basis, that will be more successfully achieved than actually some of the national highway strategies. But obviously we look forward to those coming right as well in the future. Thanks.
Okay, can I bring some of us in, and then perhaps if I bring a few in, Emma, and then you sum up towards the end, because I think a few people want to come in. Councillor Gowan?
Thank you. Yes, Emma, I don't expect you to respond. It's a political point, but it's not even a criticism of the department or of ministers in the Department of Transport, because ultimately, at the end of the day, these are Treasury decisions. I recognise and welcome what you said in terms of longer term funding. And for example, in the North East of England, we're about to move into a mayoral combined authority with an extremely generous £670 million City Region Sustainable Transport Fund. However, if you start stripping apart what that money actually is, it includes the Highways Maintenance Block Grant, which is available to every single local authority already. It includes our allocation of potholes funding, which is distributed to each authority on a per capita basis. It includes the funding that was already allocated to the region in terms of city transformation funding. So actually, when you strip it down, it's about £140 million of new funding in that period up to 27. Now, £140 million isn't insignificant. It is, and I acknowledge, new money, but it's not £650 million. Recent announcement about the City Region Sustainable Transport Funding 2, which runs from 27 to 32, I'm told, is £1.85 billion, One minister actually said that, you know, because they'd made a mistake about including the reopening of the Leamside line in the announcement of, you know, Network North, that it was up to the region. You know, we could spend our allocation of City Region Sustainable Transport Funding to £1.85 billion on reopening the Leamside line. One is, well, as long as you don't want to repair any roads or increase active travel or do absolutely anything else and just spend the whole amount on reopening the Leamside line, and then it still wouldn't be enough. Again, similarly on the BSIP, you know, acknowledge that we did really well in the North East of England. We got an allocation of £168 million, and that's making a significant difference. We've introduced £1 fares for all those who are under 21, and we've introduced multimodal fixed rates across the region, and that's had an enormous impact. Needs to, of course, because we've just come out of a 2-month strike by the major bus operator in the region, which I would kind of suspect will have turned back the clock on many of the things that we're trying to do in terms of improving bus usage. Point I'd make, though, is that when we bid in, as other regions did, for the BSIP funding, and this came from the bus strategy, which is published, I think, in March 21, which I have to say I read the document when it was published, and I couldn't disagree with a single letter in the strategy. Not a dot or comma in the entire document. Its policy drive was absolutely right. The issue was money. Okay, I think the original allocation we were told was £4 billion, but actually became £2 billion, and the North East of England bid in with our proposals for £804 million, which was an ambition over the period to stop the decline in bus usage and to increase bus usage by 10% over the period. That's desperately needed in terms of tackling issues about climate change, about air quality, about congestion, about the quality of people's lives. And that was costed and submitted. Now, we got £168 million, very grateful for it, but it doesn't hit and will never hit the policy objectives that we agree with government on that were contained within the bus strategy. That's points I'd like to make.
Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you. I feel like I should cede my time to Councillor Gannon because what you just said,
Sorry.
you were on a roll and it all made a huge amount of sense. And I want to preface what I'm about to say with the full acknowledgement that this isn't about officials in the department. I think we're increasingly working closely with officials, and that relationship is a really strong and important one. It is a political comment and should be directed at the ministers themselves. And I would kind of sort of ask whether or not there was an opportunity to invite Mark Harper to this meeting, because actually I think given the scale of the changes to the plans we've seen in the north, it would become ministers to come and present themselves to this meeting so that we could ask them questions directly, because I feel like it's a little bit unfair to direct some of this towards officials. But I will say, you mentioned a degree of cynicism about the Network North announcement. That cynicism is not our cynicism per se, it is the cynicism, I think, of our communities who have to put up with substandard transport across the north and have been promised for years and years that we're going to get certain improvements, only to see them then taken away and replaced with a series of announcements that don't have the requisite planning, business cases, etc. behind them, and therefore we know are going to take years in order to deliver. And so the cynicism comes from our communities who are now again waiting for improvements to be delivered at scale and at speed, and have had that taken away to a certain extent. On buses, and I want to follow up on the comment about BSIP if I can, South Yorkshire was the biggest region in the country to receive no money from our BSIP funding bid. We asked for £434 million for South Yorkshire's Bus Service Improvement Plan Fund and got zero from the government. The replacement or the increase in the uplift that we are supposedly going to see next year does not solve our problems today, and we've seen a 40% decrease in routes across South Yorkshire over the last decade. So the situation is urgent in South Yorkshire, and the announcements have done nothing to solve that problem. And I would welcome any comments you might have about how we should address that today, because my community are missing out on jobs, opportunities, training, hospital appointments, picking up prescriptions, seeing friends and family, because they can't get a bus. and all the announcements about HS2 have avoided that fact, and it is incredibly important, in fact vital for my community, that we solve that problem. You mentioned that the £2 bus fare cap has driven up demand, and I would be interested if you could share the details of that with this group, because we would, I think, be interested in seeing the evidence around that nationally and how that relates to the north, and particularly to mayoral combined authorities specifically. I would be interested in seeing the data that you have, and it would be great if you could share it with us. I'm keen to pick up on some of the more specific bits of the report, not least the report states the Network North announcement cancelled phases 2A and 2B of HS2, and then adds the high-speed link to the East Midlands Airport was also cancelled. This part of the former Eastern leg to Leeds and Sheffield was a key part of the HS2 phase 2B, not an add-on, as implied in the report. It is important for TFN to acknowledge that it's not only the HS2 leg to Manchester that was cancelled, but also the leg to the East Midlands that would have brought HS2 to South West and Sheffield. And again, I'm here to say that South Yorkshire sort of deserves just as good a transport infrastructure as the rest of the country, and Network North is an opportunity to do that. We're really keen to work with you to deliver that, but we do need to see some focus on South Yorkshire and the needs of South Yorkshire, Barnsley, Rotherham, Doncaster, Sheffield. There's a bunch of other things actually that I think I could say, but I'm conscious of time, and the bus fact is the one that I'm most keen for you to please respond to, how we are supposed to deal with a 40% cut to bus routes in South Yorkshire when the Bus Service Improvement Plan Fund was not given to South Yorkshire, and then the monies for South Yorkshire are not going to come, albeit smaller than we would like, until next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we were hoping to get the Minister here this morning. It does clash with questions in the Commons, and that is the reason why he's not able to be here. Otherwise, he was, either you or Mark were willing to come, but questions in the House that do take priority, and we have to acknowledge that. Mayor Bravin.
Thank you so much, Chair, and welcome, Emma, to TFN. And this is one of the most exciting departments, I think, because it's so transformational for our communities, giving our communities access to skills and to opportunity and to jobs transforms our economy, and this is where you get growth. So I look forward to working with you really closely. So, Chair, if I may, very quickly, I have 3 points. As I spoke about in the last meeting, the challenge is always Manchester and Leeds. Across east to west, 46% of those journeys have been delayed or cancelled. Network North, sadly, I don't think addresses that real challenge. We need to make sure that within Network North there is that commitment to a T-shaped station in Leeds, because you will not get fast trains from the new station in Bradford to Leeds if they're waiting outside Leeds to get a platform. And the same is true of Manchester. So we need to really focus on that money for that transformational station, that bigger T-shaped station. Also, this relates to the safeguarded land. The HS2, obviously, we've protected the land in more of a hope over experience, maybe, but we've protected that land. There will be some land that we could release, but that must be protected for the future, because things do change in politics and priorities change. We need to make sure that for future generations, our ambition isn't curtailed by the decisions we make now for the next decade. So I do hope that the department works with Leeds City Council to negotiate and to discuss that land. And finally, the missing millions. The 100 million that was for the Leeds area study, there is 40 million that's already been spent, 40 plus million that's already been spent on, and mass transit is a priority for us. So very, very grateful that we've got commitment from government, and I've said this to the Minister and to Hugh Merriman as well. The commitment is really welcome for mass transit. Leeds is the only city of its size in Europe without a mass transit system, so we value that. However, the 60 million that was allocated, what's happened to that? Where is that going to be allocated? I would suggest the electrification Leeds to Sheffield and also on to Hull would be a perfect place to as you said, Emma, to get going, to start delivering, because the people of the North have been promised so much over so many years and don't see any changes on the ground. So I'd be interested to know what the department's thinking of regarding the money that was ring-fenced for the Leeds area study. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Munbury.
Yes, again, I'm looking at 7.5 on the paper, and it's the commitment to invest in improving rail connectivity Liverpool and Manchester. Just wanted to ensure that we put Warrington in that mix, the Banky station, to say that there will be actually going there and using the Warrington Banky station as part of that link. So I'm putting a bid in for that now. And also there's on the other line, what goes through Central Station, there's an opportunity to double the capacity from Liverpool to Manchester with a turn back in Warrington, which will actually double capacity with minimal cost of a turn back in one of the stations in Warrington. So I think that's been muted and talked about. I mentioned it to the Minister a few weeks ago when I met with him, but it's not built in anything, so there's sort of no more thinking or work's been done on that. And I think that's something we could be missing out on, and double capacity with minimal investment, I think it's something we should be looking at. And then that's all my points on that one.
Okay, thank you. Emma, there's quite a few things there to address, and some of them perhaps will come up later on when we come on to the MPR. But do you want to address those points that you?
So let me start with, and you're all very kind, and I'm more than happy to take the questions, and more than happy, as we always do from these meetings, to make sure that your views are represented back to ministers. Some of the questions are at a very detailed level, and I will do my best to give a sort of initial answer, but I'm also happy to take these conversations offline. I think some of the points that have been made about levels of funding and what it is possible to do with funding, and where funding has been consolidated, what does that include? I acknowledge the concerns in there, but what I would say is that in 20 years of talking to local authorities on local growth and funding, a consistent theme has been consolidate it, give us a long-term certainty, and let us get on with it. And that is what we are doing through CRSTS and local integrated funding settlements. So I absolutely take the point that we will have differences of view about, actually what's new money, what's old money, what's wrapped up in this. But we have fundamentally shifted the way that we are thinking about transport investment, and the way that, and the opportunity for local places to have more control over how it is spent, how it is allocated, and the ability to plan and have certainty further into the future. So I think that is really important. We do not want to lose that. It is a really good platform from which then we can have, obviously, a dialogue and an ongoing dialogue about, exactly what is in, what's out, how far does this funding go, which I'm sure will continue. So I just wanted to kind of re-emphasise those points. It sounds like your bus conversation at your next board meeting is going to be quite an interesting one. I will offer from him direct. Many of you will know Stephen Fiddler, that his team engages really heavily, I know, across all of these regions, but I do think it would be worth inviting Stephen to that conversation. And I absolutely recognise some of the concerns that have been raised about, where bus funding has been allocated. I welcome the support, the continued support around the strategy and the ambition and what we are trying to deliver. But I think what we're hearing reflected is, the operating context and the fiscal context is clearly one that is challenging for us. It's also challenging for you. And I'm more than happy to continue a conversation about actually where are the pressures most acute, and is there anything more that we can do on that? And on South Yorkshire, I'm happy to take that away. And I think I'll
So is there have you got anything roughly on sort of increase in patronage?
So on the, I mean, so I will take. I don't know whether we've shared any of it locally. I mean, quite a lot of the intelligence that we get back is obviously through operators, and I don't think we have a full national picture. What I do know that we have is that on some routes in some places we are seeing a demand effect. Whether you can track it back specifically to the £2 fare is something I'm sure that our analysts will go through, but I'm happy to take the question away, because I think actually sharing that and having a conversation around that would be really helpful.
Sorry, I don't mean to be difficult, but you said £2 bus fare has driven up demand.
I said
and I
in some
scribbled it down.
places. I did say in
Okay.
some places.
Okay. So if you could share where, because it might be that they're doing something
Yeah.
alongside that which we could learn from, and I'm really happy to.
So I don't want to preempt your bus conversation, but what we find is that it is a combination of factors, as is set out in the plan. It is never one thing that is driving demand. It's frequency of service, it's reliability of service. So where we see priority bus routes go in, combined with fares measures, we see patronage go up. What you don't see is an even picture across the country. So I think it's about, where is it working, and what does it take to make it work, and what is the learning from that, and can that be replicated?
Okay, a couple of people want to come back very quickly on that. But it would be great if Stephen Fiddler could come up at our next meeting in March. That would be, and we are going to try and do a bit on buses. We are doing a bit on buses, not try, at the conference as well. I got Mayor Rotherham and Councillor Gannon and Councillor Hughes just wants to come back for a few seconds.
Well, I'm not coming back because I haven't spoken, so I won't repeat what people have said there, Chair, but I do think that stretching the geography to include potholes down south is taking the Michael, to tell you the truth, and we need to make representation of that, because if we're told that this funding has been reallocated, I think it was £36 billion, wasn't it? Not all of it is being allocated, not all of it's being allocated to the north, and not all of it's being allocated for transport projects, so we just need some clarity on that. I won't also repeat the litany of funding shortfalls and the double counting in transport projects that others have spoken about, but very much support that, especially around BSIP. I think it's really important, and trying to get a fleet of zero emission buses across the north would be one of the main aims, I would have thought, to reach some of the other targets that we've set, such as decarbonisation and improving air quality. And that's the only way we're going to be able to achieve those things. I will come to the big talking point, which is on item 7, so I won't go into detail on that, but it has just been mentioned about the connectivity between Liverpool to Manchester, including Warrington. I do think Warrington needs to be included in that. And I do want to perhaps later on tease out some of our genuine concerns, which leads on to the paper. And in 2.1, if you have a read, it's talking about the usage of the funding being ring-fenced for transport purposes. And we would have thought if it's, for transport network north funding, what else do we think that it has the potential to be used for? So I just need to know the answer to that question. And then on 2.14, this is one of the potential contentious issues because of the opaque nature of the announcement by the Prime Minister. And what he said was that there was £12 billion which was being allocated, which we believed was new money, and that was to sort out connectivity between Liverpool via Warrington to Manchester Airport and then Manchester. Subsequently, we've learned that all it is a like-for-like replacement for the HS2 funding, which actually is Crewe to Manchester, that bit. And then there's nearly £5 billion, which is the Liverpool to pick up that connectivity in Crewe. So basically, what we're now being told is that 5.1 option that we've always opposed as TFN is back on the table, and that's the thing that the government is saying they're going to fund. And I'll say it later, but just for the minutes, over my dead body.
Well, just to come back quickly, just to state the obvious, the £2 bus fare undoubtedly has driven up patronage, certainly has in rural areas, but only in places which have bus services. And Mayor Copper referred to, I think, a 40% decline in usage. I don't know whether that's number of routes or, yeah, well, I mean, rural areas have probably had an even greater loss of routes. So as our residents in Western Furness keep telling us, it's no good having cheap bus fares if there's no bus one can use. So I'm sure you'll take that aboard. Thanks.
Councillor Gallon, I think. It's nice to hear you take the credit, Martin. Okay, thank you. And Emma, thank you very much. I think sorry, you.
Let me just come back on one point, which I think is really important. I don't think we ever said that 36 billion would be reinvested in the North. The Network North announcement was very clear that the reinvestment for the North was the benefit from the North would be reinvested for the North. The number that was in the Network North announcement for that was 19.8 billion. And then the benefit that accrued to the Midlands would be reinvested in the Midlands. The benefit that was accrued, or the savings taken from Euston would be used to benefit the rest of the country. And that is why you've got a spread of projects across the country. But it was really clear in that Network North announcement that that is how ministers and the government and the Prime Minister saw the Network North announcement. I just wanted to log that. That has been publicly stated. It is in the Network North announcement. So we're not talking about 36 billion, we're talking about 19.8 billion and how that is allocated. And I recognise that there will be differences of view around this table about how that should be allocated and what that will be. But I would like to just register that point, that is very clearly what was announced by the government in the Network North announcement. But let me thank people for their comments. I feel like we've slightly preempted your later agenda item. I'm more than happy to take any points of detail away out of this meeting and continue what I think is a really strong and positive and constructive dialogue between the department, certainly the teams that I'm responsible for, with all of your executive officers in your local authorities and in your areas. So thank you.
Okay, I do want to try and move on now. I can see.
Clarifying question, if I could. About the numbers.
Okay.
So my understanding was that the last time that there was an estimate about the costs of HS2 was in 2019. When was the last time there was an estimate about the full cost of HS2?
There's been updates on a few occasions.
Okay. Because the £36 billion figure, I have never really understood as the total that was then saved from the delivery of HS2, because indeed the costs had spiralled to such an extent. And I would be interested in clarification, because the idea, I think, as you probably saw from the reaction around the table, that it was very clear that the 36 billion was not going to be spent in the North, and that only the portion that was allocated to the North would be spent in the North. Well, probably wasn't very clear to a lot of people around this table. So I think we would welcome some clarification.
I see Councillor Mayor Rotherham wants to come in as well. Briefly, please, if you can.
It will be briefly, so I'll just read what the Prime Minister said, so then there's no doubt about what he said. The Prime Minister said that £36 billion reallocation, most funding for the north of England. However, some projects has already been announced. He also said that that was alongside the £12 billion to better connect Manchester to Liverpool, alongside, not part of.
And that's true.
So yeah, well, so we just need to know actually what sums of money we're going to be allocated.
All right. We will let us. I think a couple of people have said that this was. That we're going to come back to this. It was almost like a second reading debate, which we're going to come back to a bit later on in the detail. But Emma, can I thank you very much for coming? As I think you can see, there is a great deal of concern about exactly, while accepting that a number of things have been moved forward, like the combined authorities, like more devolution, like longer term budgets, that is welcome. But there is still a need for clarity on some of the other issues, which are perhaps a little bit confusing at the moment, but hopefully they will become more realistic over time. So that is, thank you very much indeed for coming this morning. And we would like to take up the offer of Steve, if it's possible, coming to the March meeting, because certainly it does sometimes feel, and I know I certainly felt this when I was doing the job of Secretary of State, that our time is dominated by the railways, and actually transport is a lot wider than the railways, and there are a lot of things which the mayors do more locally, which they can have a much more immediate effect on than some of the planning issues on the railways, which always takes a great deal of time. So thank you very much indeed. Can we now move on then to
Thank you, Chair. I won't do a long introduction today because I think some of the conversations you've had in the preceding debate, following on from Emma, is kind of picks up. I will just pick up on a few things though, just to kind of just fill in a bit more background. There's reference in the paper about the work that the National Infrastructure Commission is going to be doing, looking at post their work on the National Infrastructure Assessment. Just to let this board know, we've been in conversation with the Chief Executive at the NIC and also officials at the department. So if we start off with the same evidence base which we hold at TFN, we're not kind of recreating lots of different pieces of work. We're starting from the same base, and I have to say that the NIC are very open for having that conversation and working with us, as indeed the department officials are. In the similar vein, there's a reference in the paper about the need to engage with the Welsh Government. We've been in touch with Welsh Government officials, and that's a conversation that they're very welcome, because I'm mindful that whilst there may have been some conversations about what it might mean for North Wales mainline electrification within Wales, it is of course a link that comes across into Transport for the North, not least Chester Crew, but actually interacts into the West Coast mainline. So again, just to reassure the board, that conversation's going on. Another little bit of a heads up, we've got Rob McIntosh here. We will be bringing to you a briefing at the next meeting on where we are with the Transpennine route upgrade, because it's about to go, it's not far before we start really seeing some major works on there, and Network Rail have done regular updates, and I think the associated with the Network North document was a confirmation of £3 to £4 billion, was it, Rob?
3.7, additional 3.7.
So that's funding to actually help with delivery, and at the board meeting in March we'll also invite Transport Focus to come along to explain how they're working to make sure the passenger experience during those blockades is as good as we can possibly make it. So again, just about progress. I think there's a number of comments made in the preceding conversation which are around details of the Northern Powerhouse Rail Network, and I would just say I think that's what we're suggesting is building on the relationship we have through the co-sponsors who are growing it, making that even stronger, so that the voice feeding in the points that Councillor Mundry is making about the insight that local perspectives can feed into that work. And I know that's a conversation I've been having with Nick Bisson about how we do that moving forward. I will just pick up as well about some of these things around implementation. You've got a paper later about how we're starting to think about advice on implementation to build upon some of that progress that Emma's made reference to already. You will know from conversations we've had previously around the Strategic Transport Plan, we think there are things that could be done better as well. Building on some of the work of the National Infrastructure Commission, we'll be bringing that back to you for detailed advice in March. And the final thing, just by way of introduction here, was to say on that particular point, Mayor Rotherham, about why is there that suggested recommendation. That was a suggestion that came through the conversation with the officers of your authorities. There was a concern that they were raising about, given the pressures on local authority budgets, if it went into a general pot for local authorities, was there a danger that you might not actually see that being available for transport because of pressures from, say, special education needs and other? So that was the reason for putting it in. But obviously, it's there for you as a board to consider. But that was the reason why that was put in there as a suggestion. If you don't feel comfortable with it, obviously it's there as a recommendation, and you can amend it. Chair, at that point, I'll leave by way of introduction, because I think the paper's fairly self-explanatory. You've got the recommendations there, and it's really for any comment.
Thanks, Chair. Roy Newton from Cheshire and Warrington Local Enterprise Partnership. Just a couple of points in support of the recommendations in the report, and one of these is particularly aimed at Emma. There's a number of organisations that have started to look at the capacity constraints on the West Coast Main Line as a consequence of the cancellation of HS2, which is understandable, because obviously HS2 would have relieved that. I think the key thing here is that these pieces of work aren't done in splendid isolation, because they can obviously directly impact on each other. Examples being electrification of the North Wales coastline and its implications on capacity at Crewe. Examples include what Network Rail are looking at in terms of the Tri-Link enhancements north of Crewe, and what sort of West Midlands are looking at in terms of capacity south of Stafford. As a consequence of that, there's a potential significant implication on the Crewe area, which could then become a significant constraint. So what I would like to see is Transport for the North getting more heavily involved with the department to make sure that these are actually all coordinated and thought of in the round rather than as individual pieces of work. And then my second point is very much around welcoming the support from TFN about the urgent need to sort of get some additional funding in to look at the implications of the cancellation of HS2 and what that means in terms of the alternatives for local transport. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I think there is also the work that is currently being commissioned by both Mayor Burnham and Mayor Street as well, which obviously has an impact on Fort Cheshire, very much in that line being done by David Higgins. So we'll see how that feeds in. We'll obviously keep an eye on, keep a watchful eye on that particular work that's going on. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a really general point in terms of the recommendations, and particularly in the context of Network North. I would like to just see, and I know it's very difficult, but I'd like to see some injection of urgency, a sense of urgency into clarification of some of these things, because the cancellation of HS2 has meant a lot of private sector investment has been put on hold, and therefore in order to unlock additional private sector investment, then there needs to be some clarity, and urgent clarity. So I just really make the point about urgency and connecting with business investment, really. Thank you.
Okay. Content then with the recommendation? Sorry.
Yeah. My question is that I recognise that it's the Treasury who determines allocations to each government department, but I wondered whether, in line with TFN's environmental, well-founded environmental aspirations, we might consider lobbying, I suppose, the Treasury to point out that perhaps something of a shift from road building towards public transport provision might be desirable. I don't know how others around the table would view that. I'm not stating, Chair, that we don't need to maintain our roads. We think we've had this debate before, but actually surely new public transport is more desirable than new roads.
We need new roads. Yeah. If I might, Chair, when the board has debated this, I think they've recognised that there are many aspects of the transport system which are actually fundamentally dependent upon the road network. So we talk about pedestrians, cyclists, we talk about buses, we talk about freight and logistics providing services. So I think it is about a combination between what you're trying to achieve as outcomes, and I think we also have to bear in mind there's a very large part of the north where the alternatives are not going to be very easy unless you're going to be using the road network. I think, Chair, we've kind of touched on that in terms of the outcome that we're trying to seek, recognising you've got more opportunities within some of the city areas rather than outside. So I would suggest focusing on what's in the transport plan about outcomes, delivering benefits in place, and then allowing for local decisions to come through on what the balance would be.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just check on the recommendations, Chair, about Mayor Rotherham's point about that bullet point on the second?
Are you content with it? Okay. Okay, can I take that as an endorsement? Thank you very much indeed. Can we then move on? Items 5 and 6, I think I'm going to join together and ask Katie to introduce those.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just briefly take item 5. As we've noted in the paper, as TFN, we do have to have due regard for current government policy. So while our intention was to bring the revised strategic transport plan back to you today following consultation to seek your adoption of it, we hope, we've had to defer that till March. So I'm just seeking the support for that deferral till March, which on the basis of the conversation we've had this morning and the recommendations under item 4, we will update the wording in the strategic transport plan to reflect the views of the board. So may I just check that that is acceptable to members?
Okay.
Thank you.
Take that as agreed.
On item 6, looking for board feedback and views here today, we've had some initial conversations with yourselves via the partnership board and also with your officers over the summer and through the strategic transport plan consultation. One of the roles that TFN we have as a board here, one of our statutory roles, is about advising on opportunities to improve effectiveness and efficiency in delivery of transport functions. So we wanted, as Martin has already mentioned, to provide alongside the strategic transport plan advice on implementation about how we might be able to do things more quickly and more simply. And the paper sets out 3 areas where we believe that there is an opportunity here. The first one is around what we call system reform, and I'm going to take the paper as read, but just to pull out a couple of points. This very much is around simplification of funding streams, moving away from the bidding process and the resources that goes into those bidding processes, giving us the opportunity to better manage the interdependencies between different policies and investments within a place. And actually, we've seen some of the progress already with the points that have been made this morning about LITs and some of the other transport funding, but to continue that devolution of local transport budgets to local authorities, mayoral combined authorities, so that actually we can make those decisions about transport investment closer to the people and the places that they impact. And the final element under system reform that we would like to work up and present advice is actually thinking about a new appraisal playbook. We have a one-size-fits-all approach, which means dealing with the overheating and economic development in London, the South East, is being treated in the system as the same way as what we're trying to do here in the North around stimulating economic potential. So actually recognising those different policy drivers in how we assess investment and giving us more opportunity to perhaps look beyond the traditional benefit-cost ratio and think more about the environmental and the social benefits for our communities and our people. The second element to implementation was very much around what TFN can be doing and leading and supporting, and your officers have been really helpful to us here in identifying those cross-cutting policy matters such as freight and logistics, international connectivity, also rural mobility and decarbonisation, as well as the work we've been doing on transport-related social exclusion and how we can continue to work together as a region to build our evidence and case for change across those areas. And importantly as well, I think not as well as enhancing that regional evidence base to make our case for investment to government, we also have got a growing technical capability and capacity within TFN, what we've called our offer to local transport authorities, and to be able to use that, and particularly the appraisal and analytical tools that we've built to help us assess those and make those better cases for investment here in the north of England. And I think finally under TFN's role as well, we are afforded as a statutory body different powers that actually allow us to give insight, give advice on where national funding pots should be directed into relation to highways and railways. And we've seen some of that we've had through the Rail North Committee, but actually perhaps we've got an opportunity to better use those powers that are available to us as a board here to give that advice into government on those national POPs. And finally, the other element of implementation that we'd like to provide advice around alongside the Strategic Transport Plan is about that investment pipeline, and that really speaks to the point I've just made about where we can influence those national pots of funding for those pan-regional schemes, those interventions that this board sees as critically important over 5, 10, 15 years and beyond, and being able to use those to articulate TfN's position into spending reviews and subsequent budgets. And I shall stop there because I would be really grateful to have your thoughts and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Katie, and thank you as well for the offer of working with us as we develop our own transport plan. It's going to be transformational for West Yorkshire with all the changes potentially coming around bus, but also mass transit as well. So thank you for that. Just one question regarding the document. There weren't many figures in the document reflecting the scale of investment that we need in the north. And as we've seen from the previous conversation, there's a bit of a lack of clarity about what is actually available and where those pots are being aligned. And I do feel that the STP could be strengthened by providing that investment programme that we saw before, just to give us all that clarity about where this money could potentially be going. As we've heard just earlier, just that clarity from the Department of Transport to help you with those figures would also be helpful.
Okay. Anybody else want?
Yeah, just a very quick one there. I think it's important we continue to work as a whole and support each other and that vision for the north going forward. And as the money gets fragmented and split up, and we don't actually get distracted and we still work together and have one vision for the north where we can all benefit, and to not get dragged into fragmentation of separate schemes.
I think that was a point that was made by Mayor Rotherham as well at an earlier meeting, that we need to make sure that we're a voice of one, as well as the individual particular cases. Anybody else? Can we take it that the report then is endorsed? Okay. Sorry.
We'll pick up on. Chair, I was just going to say we'll pick up on the point made by Mayor Braben, because I think the other thing we need to bear in mind, and we've certainly, as your executive, got in mind, is we are heading into a spending review, and that's a good time to have that evidence-based pitch in as to this is what you need to deliver this outcome in terms of the economy, the environment, and societal benefits. So it's a timely point to do it.
And a lot of that work obviously will include your officers as well, that we'll work very closely with. Okay, can I take that then as an endorsement of Katie's report? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Can we then move on to item 7, which is the Rail North Committee update, and I'm going to ask Darren to introduce the paper and some suggestions that we've got. Darren.
Thank you, Chair. A very busy Rail North Committee last time. The key issues that we touched on was rail station accessibility, ticket office closures, and in particular the disappointing performance from Avanti. So they were all matters that we went through. We've progressed those, as you can see, in the paper, and we've also asked Avanti to return in February to Rail North Committee. So they were all ones that are there in the note. I think it's also worth just saying that as part of the business planning review that takes place, we had some very positive responses from the train operating companies about patronage. You know, I think it's important that we keep reminding ourselves that patronage is returning to the north, particularly for the leisure market, and and that I think was well received by Rail North Committee. That continued trend to recovery. But in many ways, the most important matter of the day at RNC was around the East Coast Main Line and the proposed changes to the timetable. And I think the note sets it out that you have in front of you, but I think the best way to express this is that it was a yes, but a yes but, and it was quite a big but really, because there were a range of issues with regard to the East Coast Main Line that members were understandably particularly concerned about. And those 3 points are set out in the in the paper that you have in front of you. Members will also be aware that we've had correspondence from the Rail Minister and from LNER over recent days. So I think members should have got it on Tuesday, and I think key officers have received that as well over the last 48 hours or so. And I think just to get to the heart of that, the three key concerns that we had, I think have been largely addressed by the correspondence from LNER and from the Minister. I think in particular what I would draw members to is the key point, which is in the letter from Minister Merriman to Martin about funding of the rail enhancements, and that clearly sets out that funding. There is that commitment there for that funding of the 3.5 billion. And I think that was one of the key issues that we were all particularly concerned about. So I think they were the main points that I wanted to raise. I'm sure that Mayor Burnham will want to say something on this as well. But I think it's also worth saying that certainly Councillor Gannon has got some strong views on this, understandably, and there have been some suggestions from himself and from Mayor Driscoll about alternative resolutions that might come forward, and we have copies of that which will circulate around in a moment or two in terms of how we take this forward. So I think that where we've got to on this is that we've got to a point where Transport for the North's minimum requirements were not met, by this. But by working with colleagues in the department and LNER, I think we move into a position where the suggestion is a reluctant acceptance of the proposals, subject to the tweak to this resolution that is in front of us today.
Andy, do you want to?
Well, should we deal with the East Coast issue first and let Martin and others come in, and then I would like to give a broader update.
Okay, Councillor Gannon.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. I do find myself somewhat in a difficult position. After the Rail North Committee meeting, I did go back to the North East Joint Transport Committee, presented the discussions, and it was the unanimous views of the 7 authorities in the North East of England that they did not want to endorse this timetable. Okay. And as I outlined to the Rail North Committee, it's because of profound implications in terms of connectivity in the North East. Now, part of the problem, of course, is that short of getting a time machine, I can't actually rectify those problems, because they're problems not just of this government, but of previous governments as well. They go back 40 years. When the East Coast Main Line was electrified in the 1980s, part of the East Coast Main Line wasn't. So we now call it the Leeds Line, but it was part of the East Coast Main Line. So we have this ridiculous situation where the North East is constrained by 2 rails, and there just isn't the capacity. Okay, so it's freight, Transpennine, and intercity trains, 6 slots maximum. If we're not talking about constrained capacity at some undefined period in the future, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're talking about now. The North East of England is economically, socially constrained by the capacity of its rail system. I live in central Tyneside, I live in Gateshead. So it'll be fantastic for me, because I'll get 3 trains an hour to London, including the fast train that won't be stopping. Okay, so that'll be excellent for me. But if you live in Darlington, Durham, Morpeth or Berwick, the implications are profound. And we lose the service to Manchester. Now, I know, at the present time we don't have that service to Manchester because it's taken off by Transpennine for other reasons. But it would come back. But it can't come back without the capacity on the East Coast Main Line being improved. At the meeting on the 14th of November, I was extremely grateful for the support we received from colleagues across the region, across the north, for the problems that we have in the North East of England. Although we recognise that introducing three services an hour, north-south on the East Coast Main Line, has massive improvements for the rest of the country. And for the, it raises an additional £60 million of revenue, which will be invested into the network. So I was very grateful for the support that was given by colleagues across the north. And as a consequence of that, we did have a flurry of meetings. I had meetings with LNER, with Hugh Merriman and others, and had, I've never had so many letters, but and the resolution was that we were minded to, or agreed, subject to. Now I've got to ask myself, has that been satisfied? Okay, because Hugh Merriman's letter does commit, says, to the 7th hourly path between North Holland and Newcastle that will be specifically included in the rail network enhancement pipeline. £3.5 billion, which is already committed to East Coast Main Line. But then it goes on, as you will be aware, RNEP progresses through decision gateways, and the department anticipates that funding will be made available to deliver the scheme, subject to business case approval and confirmation in departmental budget, capital budgets in future fiscal events. Right, now, I accept, right, okay, that there's a number of hurdles there, and we're being asked to support a timetable which has to be decided by the end of this year, which will be introduced at the back end of next year, December 24. And if we manage to get through the business case approvals and confirmation of departmental capital budgets of future fiscal events, we might get these interventions implemented in the northeast of England, maybe 2027. So there'll be negative impacts in the northeast of England for a national benefit and connectivity of the rest of the north, on the basis that we might get something in 2027. Sorry, there's a joke, isn't there, where they say, if you want to get to Tipperary, I wouldn't be starting from here. That's what it feels like at the present time. You wouldn't want to start from here, but we are where we are. And as I said at the beginning, other than getting a time machine and go back to the 1980s to change the decisions that were made in terms of investment in the East Coast Main Line, probably find myself in a position where I've got no alternative but to support the motion that is going to be proposed, that we agree the timetable, but I would welcome the continued support of colleagues to hold ministers, whether from this government or an incoming government in the future, to hold ministers' feet to the burning logs to deliver on that commitment for the North East of England.
Thank you, Martin. I just wondered if, Rob, if you wanted to sort of give a bit of an update as to, you used to deal with this side of the line for Network Rail. I mean, I think as we saw from last weekend, the disaster, the pulling down of the coming down of the electric wires, just what and the electrification on the East Coast Main Line was in the 80s done on the cheap. That is really the part of the problems, I think. But
Chair, I wouldn't say it was done on the cheap. I'd say it was done to budget, which is unusual for railway projects.
Well, I've heard other people say to me it was done on the cheap, but I accept it was done to budget at the time.
Well, someone has nursed that for nearly 8 years, that particular asset. That particular asset, we owe it nothing more 40 years on than some TLC, to be honest. And a storm passed over the country on Saturday night, which made the repairs quite difficult. I think a few things to say. From a Network Rail perspective, in 2021, we concluded investing 1.2 billion, which was authorised by you, Chair, in your previous role, in getting the infrastructure to upgrade that timetable as a first step. So it's essential that we put through this proposed change to maximise the benefit of that. I know that the department have remitted and are funding Network Rail to progress with the works to deliver that seventh path. And indeed, we were in the the north end of York Station last Christmas, beginning with the preparatory work with some of the track renewals, which the DFT had partly funded through the enhancements pipeline. And that the teams in Network are now working on the additional works that need to be done to realise that seventh path north of York. The 2024 timetable is an interim step on the way to much more investment on the East Coast main line, and it is normal practice for our investment decisions to be subject to business case gateways, and indeed, you know, that's Nick might want to comment, and it's within Minister's gift to what extent they want to sign off on those business case gateways, if indeed, you know, they have a challenged business case ratio.
I think the only thing I'd add, and it's effectively in the letter from Minister Merriman, is that, you know, we are required to maintain a sort of long-term plan for rail enhancements, not least to demonstrate affordability, and this is absolutely sort of front and centre of that, and the money is kind of therefore earmarked. We need to get through the development piece, and we need to get through the sort of business case, and I guess constitutionally no government can bind its successors, but that's where we are.
Councillor Gittings.
Yes, I'm going to move to the other side of the country now, to Avanti. Their performance in the last couple of weeks has been...
Can we come back to that?
Oh, right,
can we deal with this one first,
yes,
and then come back to Avanti? I think Andy will want to talk about Avanti. Let's do East Coast if we can first. So, Councillor Braben, Mayor Braben, sorry. Councillor
Braben. maybe in another life. It's a great job. Just to say regarding that route, you'll know that at Foster Square in Bradford, we now have the platforms. We need clarification around the timetable to make sure that we have those direct routes from London to Bradford. And just to get that on record, that we need to make the case, having spent all the money on Foster Square, that we will get the trains that take us from London to Bradford.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just to support colleagues from the North East, we share the concerns about the lack of capacity on the East Coast Main Line and the length of time it's going to take to upgrade it. And we raised that issue directly with the Minister last week. And I just want to make sure, I know everybody around this table knows this, but make sure it's on the record. You know, this has become an acute problem because of the cancellation of HS2, first to Leeds and then to Manchester, because that additional capacity that it could have given us is now all going onto that East Coast Main Line, and we're at the point of having to choose between passengers and freight, and it's not a position that's acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
I certainly don't want to interfere in sort of east of the Pennines decision making, if I can avoid it. But I noticed that the letter from Ellen Niar suggested that TfN might have the power to influence the number of trains calling at Durham and Darlington. I don't know if Councillor Gannon wants to comment on this. And I put myself in the hands of those who know more about this than I do, but I thought we ought to respond to that offer.
Martin.
I wouldn't want to.
Okay, well, we've gotten a suggested resolution around the table, which Martin says he regretfully can live with. I think is the best way of describing his attitude. Sorry.
Chair, if I might, we just also need to, I think, for the record that we had comments from Mayor Driscoll about the East Coast Main Line as well.
No, they were referred to earlier on, so that they were acknowledged earlier on. Okay, can I take it that people are content with the resolution that's been put around the table, please, which are the three particular points? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, okay, that I think deals with the East LNER and the East Coast. Andy, do you want to come back now on to the Rail North Committee, but also I know you want to say something about Avanti as well.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Good to see you all. Could I just start, though, by saying that the committee strongly supported Martin and colleagues in the North East, and I think there's a serious point here for the Department for Transport to take away. The North East, it seems to me, is badly treated by the country when it comes to transport, because it isn't just the rail network. The road network gets constrained as you travel, but it's just not right. I mean, they do not have the same level of either motorway or railway connectivity as other parts of England, and I don't see how it can possibly be justified. So just wanted to say, Martin, you've got full support, I think, from all members of the Rail North Committee. And it's an intolerable situation that shouldn't be allowed to carry on any longer. Chair, if I could, I will just brief colleagues on some of the other issues that were raised at the Rail North Committee. And I think it's very important that I go to the first item that was on the agenda, which is disability access to our rail stations across the north. I think we need to see a change at this board that we've tried to make at the Rail North Committee, which is this is a first order issue, not a last item on the agenda issue. If some of our fellow citizens can't use the railways, it should be the main thing that we start to discuss. And until you've solved that, I don't think we should even be talking about issues around services. It is a hugely important issue that's been neglected for too long. We had the figures, a previous Rail North Committee, around half of our stations in the north of England, more than half, not having acceptable step-free access. It's just not on in any way, shape or form in this day and age. And what I observe is a complete sort of, disregard of the issue by the industry. If those stations were devolved, we would come up with plans to get disability access into those stations, because we would make better use of them from a commercial point of view, from a development point of view. We would find ways of making those stations accessible. It is not right in the slightest for those stations just to sit there without any attention or investment as they deteriorate and still remain inaccessible to many of our residents. So the Rail North Committee has established a task and finish group on this issue. I was grateful for offers from members to join the working group. I think we should learn from the best, which I have to say is my neighbour sitting right next to me, Mersey Rail. But we also in this city can have some pride in the accessibility standards introduced on Metrolink, which are of the same standard as Mersey Rail. It's something that has to start to come to this board more often. I don't see how we can justify sitting here and not discuss this every time that we meet, because if I was unable to access my local station, I would expect it to be raised at every single meeting until it's fixed. So I'm sorry to put it in those blunt terms, Chair, but I just think the industry needs to be told it in these blunt and no uncertain terms, because it isn't right. We also discussed ticket offices and next steps following the consultation on the closure of ticket offices. And I just want to thank members of this board, as well as the Rail North Committee, for the clear way in which we approached the issue, and the united front that was presented, recognising that the closure of ticket offices would have presented more difficulties to people in the north who were already facing challenges in getting around and use ticket offices for all kinds of information, not just to buy tickets. So, to be fair, the government listened and came to the right conclusion, but we don't want to see a revival of this proposal in its previous form. There is a discussion to be had about, as I said, the devolution of rail stations, and how perhaps here in Greater Manchester, for instance, we could look at how those ticket offices could be staffed differently, used differently. We're open to that, but we do not want to see that proposal return in its previous form. Chair, I know colleagues want to, Councillor Gittings wants to come in on Avanti, and I would say rightly so. We did receive a performance update. We requested Mr. Mellors, the Managing Director of Avanti West Coast, to attend our meeting. It was good that he did, but I don't think it is possible to say that he reassured members. Also, colleagues from Northern and Transpennine Express attended, Transpennine trains, I should say, and gave an update. I think what we've seen, Chair, since that meeting took place a month or so ago, we've seen services deteriorate again across the north of England. It has been now what I would say another bad autumn going into winter. Problems on all three of the operators with high levels of cancellation and poor performance. Let me give you, if I may, the figures as of this week. Well, I'll go with Northern first, 73% PPM reliability, 10% cancellation. Transpennine trains 77% PPM standard, 9% trains cancelled. I mean, that can't be the new normal. I mean, it just cannot be right that you expect a sort of 3 out of 4 to be on time. It's got to be better than that, surely. And we were told at this board always, we make these changes to the timetable like Martin's being asked to do, and it will get better. And it doesn't get better. I mean, it's just Groundhog Day at this board sometimes. You kind of make these things, you kind of take the detriment, and then you never get the benefit that they promise. But let me just read the figures for members. For Avanti West Coast this week, we've had 49.5% of trains arriving within the acceptable time. 49.5. We've had 27% of trains cancelled or seriously delayed. That is absolutely appalling at this time of year when people are trying to get around to see family or to come here to bring the boost that we should be entitled to expect with the Christmas markets taking place in Manchester. That is shocking level of service. But if I look at this morning, I've had figures for this morning, 37 cancellations Avanti this morning, 11 part cancellations, and the reason given is cancelled due to train crew shortages. I mean, what good is that to anybody to be told that type of information? This is the company that had already reduced the December timetable. It is not on. It is not on. And I say to people from the Department for Transport, you cannot possibly come to this board anymore and expect us to put up with this level of service. This is damaging the economy of this city region. And it is not good enough. How you gave this company an extension to their contract, a long extension, I cannot understand how that was even contemplated. They should have been on probation and they should now be at risk of being, they should now be removed on the basis of this level of performance. Train crew shortage is not an acceptable reason to be decimating the timetable out of this city at this time of the year. We have had enough of it. And I just say to you, Chair, what remedies can you suggest to improve this situation? Because we've had year after year after year of this now, and we will simply not put up with it any longer.
Well, you've stolen my thunder there, Andy. But I was going to say exactly the same. The service to Chester this week and to North Wales has been decimated, to be honest. People have been left stranded in Euston. We already feel like a branch line with the recent reduction in the timetable. And my concern is the more they take the trains away, the less they're going to put back. And we're going to end up with cut off basically from the rest of the country. So I think as part of our resolution as well, we need to say something about Avanti. I've been in touch with Mr. Mellor this week and I got a lovely long email about all the great things they're doing, and then hidden away at the bottom we have had some issues around staffing, and it isn't acceptable. I arrived at Crewe Station at 9 o'clock at night and there were Avanti trains cancelled. So people were left stranded, and for a woman at 9 o'clock at night, I was okay because I got on a Transport for Wales train, but other people were left stranded, and it's just not on, and we do need to come down really strongly, collectively, because it's decimating the whole of the West Coast. And by the way, Chester was voted the prettiest city in the world a few weeks ago, so we want lots of people to come and visit us.
Different but similar. It's about, I think, what we call short forming. I've come down this morning on a train from East Lancashire. People were standing everywhere, all the way through the train, right from getting on at Blackburn, and it got worse as the train came down. I mean, I don't travel on it every day, but the people who do say it's the same every day. So whilst the story of patronage is a good story, in terms of comfort and passenger comfort, it's not right. And I mean, the idea that it is the same every day, I mean, it's a little similar to the point that Andy and Louise have just made. It's the same every day. So every day, passengers who pay good money, season tickets apparently cost about £2,000 a year, they travel on the train and they're forced to stand up, push around, push past each other. Do we have any way of encouraging the operators to take passenger comfort? I mean, just to pick up a point that Andy was making earlier, I'm not sure what anyone who had disabilities would have done to get on that train. I've just got no idea how that would even work. So it is a point. I mean, I know it's not in the the major scale, but this is what people judge us by. They don't. In the end, the travelling public, they don't judge us on some of these grandiose schemes that we talk about. They judge us on what happens when they get on the train every day. So there is a point there, Chairman.
Okay, we'll come back in a few seconds. I've got Mayor Braben and Mayor Coppard first.
Thank you, Chair. And just to support colleagues around this table, that the resilience of the network is not where it should be, because the challenges in Greater Manchester then impact massively on Leeds. So people are travelling to Leeds in order to get to London, and then overcrowding on those routes as well. It's not acceptable, and I hope the message has landed that it can't continue. My point, Chair, was about stations. 71% of stations in West Yorkshire aren't accessible. It's unacceptable. We have to prioritise those with disabilities so that they can use the network. That's absolutely got to be a number one focus. However, one of the challenges is the fact that new stations, the maintenance of those stations is put on the shoulders of the local authorities, and we have the only developer-led new build station in White Rose in the whole country, and they have to have now the cost of operating the station for the lifetime of the station, and this could be a disincentive because you don't get any of the revenue. It all goes back to the Treasury. So when we're asking developers and when we're trying to be ambitious when it comes to accessibility, how can we be when we are having the costs of the station on our shoulders, but actually none of the revenue to help soften that blow? We need a new look at where funding comes from for our stations.
I think that's a very good point, and I don't know if it's one of the things that gets dealt with by GBR if and whenever we see it set up, and we're supposed to have pre-leg scrutiny of the bill in the new year, so it'll be interesting to see, but I'm not sure whether that will actually answer the wider point. Councillor Coppard. Sorry, Mayor Coppard. Sorry. Do apologise.
We're all swapping jobs. Just a quick point. Want to absolutely offer my support for colleagues across the Pennines around Atlantic, because clearly it is absolutely unacceptable, the situation facing passengers day to day. Those numbers are actually quite shocking, and I cannot believe that people are being asked to put up with that every single day. So any support we can offer from South Yorkshire, happy to do so. Just on the equality issue, or equalities issues more broadly about stations, and I've mentioned this point before, and I would appreciate some comments from the Chair, not necessarily today, but going forward, about how we are addressing those issues on this committee more broadly. I look around the table, and of course not all disabilities are always evident, but I do sort of am minded to sort of think that actually maybe we aren't representing here at this committee some of the communities that we seek to represent across the transport network. I've made the point before at Rail North Committee, I've made the point before here, and I do think we might need to take a view as Transport for the North about how we are bringing voices into these meetings that represent the full diversity of our communities, and that is as much about disabilities as it is about equalities more broadly, and I would appreciate some thought going into that and then coming back to this meeting with some sense of how we might address that going forward, because I think voices in the room are important, and at the moment it doesn't feel to me like we have all the voices in the room that we represent out there in our communities.
No, and I think that, in fairness, you made that point at the last meeting as well, and perhaps we do need to think a bit carefully about how we properly address that issue. So I'll give an undertaking that we will do that. Sorry, Councillor Hughes first.
Yeah, it was just on Avanti and ticket office closures. Whilst the other operating companies seemed all too keen to respond to the government's calling off of the ticket office closures consultation, they were falling over each other to get the first announcement. And Avanti appeared to be holding back on actually relinquishing the opportunity to close. I think in their case all their ticket offices, and maybe a misperception, but I think there were several hours, if not a day, later in actually accepting what the government was telling them to do. And I just wondered if we can ascertain whether there are still Avanti plans for closing some of their ticket offices, irrespective of whether the government's attempting to do this. It must have just been poor publicity by the company, which kind of adds the poor image, unfortunately, they've accrued in recent times.
Just a very practical solution, Chair. I think others around this table can actually go out with somebody who actually is in a wheelchair or has a disability, go to the stations, see for yourself. That's most powerful. There's something the Chairman recently on the news, and it was very interesting. So do it yourselves, and then you can, you're also really savvy, and then you can highlight difficulties of the individuals.
I think that is a fair observation, but doesn't give the full picture, but it helps the picture a bit. I think that's certainly true. Is there anybody else who wants to come back in? I want to bring Mayor Burnham back. Sorry.
So I just want to make one. Disappointment and quality of service performance, but it's more than that, right? Because both in the northeast of England, where we're constrained by our infrastructure, and elsewhere in the north, where it's been damaged by lack of investment in quality of the service, whether it's through drivers or trains or whatever it might be, okay? It's having an impact on people's lives, not just inconvenience. It's, where I am in Gateshead, it'll be the same across the north, right? A third of children in Gateshead are growing up in poverty because of the damage this is having on our economies. And when we came together as Transport for the North, the vision was that it was about economic. We laid out the proposals. We spent years laying out the plans, costing them out for the Northern Powerhouse Rail proposal. It was backed upon a pan-North economic strategy about realising that pent-up and restricted economic potential. It's no wonder the country crawls along the bottom in negative growth. Last month, minus 0.3%. The implications on people's lives, and not just the inconvenience, it's the poverty and deprivation that's caused by it.
I think what I'd like to thank you. Thanks for that, Martin. I think what I'd like to suggest is that both myself and Andy write to the Secretary of State following today's figures, which I think are incredibly disappointing considering everything that was sort of promised, and ask him to personally look and tell us what his view on this is following this meeting. So we'll get that letter off. I'd like to do that in the first instance, Andy, as a urgency, if that meets with your acceptance and everybody else's acceptance. Certainly those figures are quite. I hadn't caught up with today's, latest figures. I mean, there does become an issue sometimes when things go wrong that leads to disruption in service for all sorts of different reasons, and it can sometimes be outside the control of the operator, but certainly the figures that you're talking about are not outside the operator. So I think we'll do that, Martin.
If I might, Chair, I think it needs to be quite a simple letter. I think it just needs to be saying something along the lines: the current performance of Avanti is totally unacceptable due to the adverse impact of performance, damaging impact on people in the economy, and there's an urgent need for, it needs to be urgently reviewed, their performance, and action needs to be prioritised. It's something along the line, but if the board is comfortable that we work together with yourself and the chair of the Rail North Committee, we can get that sorted out.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues on the board, for your support. I think you can understand why we feel like we do. We had the decimation of our timetable in 2022, and we've just had you know, a poor service all year this year. I think that review has to be urgent. Next week is a big week. People are travelling to see family. It is not fair on people. It just isn't fair for them to be kind of thrown into that kind of chaos and panic and worry about getting home. They need to improve it. Now, as you said, Chair, the stated reason this morning, because bear in mind the timetable has collapsed this morning, the stated reason is train crew. That is entirely within their gift, entirely. The weather is not, and we hear their excuses all of the time. There's no excuse, none, on that particular issue. But can I just make a further point, and this applies to Avanti, but it also applies to other operators. You know, when you see that cancellation rate that I quoted, what that means is trains, as we all experience, are just overcrowded, and obviously Councillor Riley referenced that. The knock-on effect on other services is huge. I travel over to Liverpool at weekends, as people know, for football. On Sunday, again, it's the case that people are crammed into the kind of vestibule near the first-class accommodation because there's chaos all through the train and people don't know what they can do. On this level of performance from Avanti, can anyone around this table justify that there are 4 first-class carriages just there, empty, and then everyone else is crammed into the remaining 4 trying to make it work? I can't justify it. And what I would say to you, Chair, is I believe all of our trains should be declassified. At this level of performance, I don't see how it can be justified that they're running services that have got people crammed in one bit and then, you know, nobody in other bits of the train. And I would say that till they perform, we should have people should be able to sit anywhere in the train for the ticket prices that they are paying. And I would suggest that as we go into 2024, there should be a declassification across the network so that people can get at least a reasonable travelling experience compared to what they're having to put up with at the moment. So no first-class carriages on trains in the north of England from January. That is, I'm trying to think of solutions, and I think that's a fair solution. Until they perform, they've not got the right to do this to people and then leave them crammed in the way that they're doing. So that is a proposal. It's meant to be helpful, Chair, because it's what else can we do?
What I'd like to, Andy, what I'd like, sorry, Louise.
I'll second that. If that's going to be a resolution, I'll second that, Andy, because I agree.
Chair, I would like some legal advice on whether we have the power to insist on that, because they're private. Well, if that's going into the motion, sorry, if it's going into the motion, that it's well intentioned, I know, but if we're telling Avanti that they shouldn't operate first class, well, we need to know whether we have the legal power, surely, to insist on that.
I think we can, I mean, we can, in a resolution, we can say what we want to say, whether it is then acted upon. I mean, I think this is the sheer frustration, which at the moment is quite clearly coming through. So what I'd quite like to do, though, is to separate the two issues, because I think the issue that we first talked about is one that we need an answer of straight away. The other issue is part of our possible solutions to what is seen as a crisis, and I don't want to get the two confused.
But Chair, if I may, if this level of performance continues next week, when people are coming up with bags and presents, and it is a now issue, I think, because obviously you've got a high volume of people travelling with a lot of luggage.
Okay, I want to make progress because we've got quite a lot of other things to cover. And
Chair, could I just intervene? I think the board does have the power to offer that as statutory advice if it wishes to.
Thank you. Any other points before we move on? Councillor Mundry.
I'll be as quick as I can, Chair. I think it was foreseeable. I think the poor performance was echoed around this board many times about it, particularly about Ivante. I think it was foreseeable. Unfortunately, the poor performance has continued and actually got worse as we've gone on. I think the solution has been moved and set, and we can actually vote on that at some point. But I think how the only people who didn't foresee what was going to happen was the government who awarded a contract again against advice from people from the north.
Okay. Councillor Rennie.
Just to say, I stopped using my train line for exactly the same reasons in 1999. The things haven't moved on, but until you address the staffing shortages, why I just don't understand why you can't add carriages onto trains for those people. I asked those questions back in 1999. I know the station issues, but we just talk about the same things we talked about 20 odd years. I don't have much hope, to be honest.
I mean, it is unbelievable because we did have the weekend changes, which were bad enough, but to have this as well in the week, it is quite disturbing to hear. So we will. Can I see an indication of all those who supported the 2 points which have been put forward? One, to complain about the service overall on Avanti, and the second about declassification for at least for the next few weeks, so that people can have the service that they want. I don't know what the commercial arrangements are there. That's not for us to take a view on. Is there anybody against any of that? Okay, well, we'll get that letter up later today, tomorrow. Okay. Right, can we move on then to item 8, Julie, governance update?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. This is a report asking the board to appoint a new independent member for our important Audit and Governance Committee, Mr Stuart Green, with effect from the 1st of October 2024, next year, and to extend the terms of office of 2 of the existing independent members. In the case of Mr Brady, until the 30th of September 2024, that's to allow a handover period until the point at which Mr Green's term will begin, and Mr Bell, who is the current independent chair, until the 30th of April 2025, and that's to take his term of office until the point at which he would wish to step down from the role. In the future, we will be developing further a programme to allow a rolling programme of reappointments to continue to ensure we've got a balance between experience and new membership, allowing the necessary independence, and we'll bring further reports to board in due course. So I commend the 3 recommendations to board, Chairman. Thank you.
With that, don't see any objections. Our next meeting, we're going to break now for a short while, and then we're having a private meeting on the document which has been circulated earlier this week. But the date and time of the next meeting is the 20th of March, Wednesday the 20th of March at 10:30, and that will be in Leeds. So can we just take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 12:25? Thank you very much indeed.